Digital Archive Cannabis Cup HIGH TV Español. Digital Archive Cannabis Cup HIGH TV Español. Featured categories: News, Viewed Posts, Guides, Viewed Posts, Grow, Viewed Posts, Events, Viewed Posts, Entertainment, Viewed Posts, Culture, Viewed Posts, Social Links. News, Legalization, Politics. Browse by state: Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, Illinois, Oklahoma, Oregon, Washington. Business, Culture, Events, Grow, Products, IR, Get Medicine Card, Get Weed. The latest. Who is Binoid? Are they legit? News, Elite Cultivation, where the people make the difference. Featured Grow News Oklahoma sponsored. THCA Moon Rocks Review. Edibles featured. Where Cannabis Meets Cultural Legacy. Exhibits XWCC and Snoop Dogg's Sweat. Business, Celebrities, Dispensaries. Entertainment featured sponsored. Weirdos. Why we hate copes. The cannabis community and the police force have been at odds forever, and that's not going to change until they do. Bajan Capita. July 7, 2023. Shutterstock. Total: 0 shares. I try not to hate anybody. Hate is a rot. It festers and spoils, it disrupts. It's not healthy. Not that I'm pretending to care about my health, but most beneficially, hate can be an agent of change. When we acknowledge problems, we name them, and ideally start the work to make them better. More, I guess people insulate themselves from them as necessary too, but my goal here is the former. I recognize this probably isn't the best piece I could write as far as personal safety goes, and I don't really expect anyone to change their mind because of something I wrote, but if they at least understand where the other side is coming from, and maybe take that into account when working on policies for the future, then I've done my job. So with that said, on the list of things I truly can't help but hate, copes are about as high on the list as it goes. I think I speak for the larger community here when I say this, but for the sake of this argument and not putting the target on anyone else's back, here's my take on some of the inherent issues with the police force as it exists today, and why so many of us are so wholly opposed to their entire state of being. He said what? Now I know as soon as they see this headline there's going to be a mob of thin blue line folk on social who want to tear into this one, and I get it. Your dad, or brother, or husband's a cope. Maybe even your mom, or sister, or wife. Asterisk equality exclamation point asterisk they're not all bad, you'll say. Sure, but for the sake of understanding, get through this before jumping down my throat and let me know if your father, brother, or husband or that of the opposite sex co-sign the agreed behavior. I would also like to remind you from the jump that this is a choice they made, and not an unavoidable physical or mental trait they were born with. It's just a job, and I know very few people who like theirs, so take that for what it's worth. Further, recognize this is not personal. This is not some I hate this person statement. It's more, I hate this machine. I hate the industrial complex. I hate what the individual represents more than I do the actual human, but I can't help the associations people choose to make, no matter the consequence. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but if they do not see the issues in any of the below examples, and if they're not actively, on their own, working to be an agent of change to correct these major flaws, then yes, I am abso-fucking-lutely talking about them. The fundamental problem with copes. I think at the most basic level the core issue here is that copes are paid tattletales. Whether or not you remember, understanding that tattletales are dickheads is like one of the first lessons you learned on the playground. It's been ingrained into us. When someone, who was usually uninvolved in whatever you were doing, goes to tell whatever authority that may exist that you've done something you maybe shouldn't have, something that they would otherwise be unaware of, we can all agree that's pretty lame behavior, right? Fuck tattletales. I understand the first response to that is going to be that you were doing something wrong, too, which I'm not objecting to whatsoever, but you also learned that two wrongs don't make a right, right? I'm not advocating for violence or destruction here when I say that there's some super fun shit to do that isn't exactly cool in terms of the law, but if it's not hurting anybody, does it really matter? The tree falling in the woods, if you will. I'm not saying that there's never a reason to get a higher power to help right a wrong, especially if someone is in need of help, but I am saying that 99% of the time it's not necessary. Sure, call the authorities and get someone to the hospital, or out of a burning building. But tattletaling is not that. Worse, however, is if you're an uninvolved observer who tattletales on someone else for the sake of getting themselves out of trouble, or for profit. It could be something they did too, but often didn't even involve or affect them, for whatever reason. We have a word for that too. It's snitch. This is more specific to undercovers I guess, but we don't like those either. Fuck all them, too. So at this base level, understanding how we all felt back as kids, how are you all now, as full-grown adults, surprised that people think being paid for that action is lame? That's A1 shit. Snitching is against the code, and you've made it a profession. The very idea of patrolling is going out and looking for people to hem up because they're violating some needless restriction that's most often not hurting anybody, that's nonsense. However, it gets worse. Maybe it's just my perception, but it doesn't seem like the tattletales have to follow the same rules and restrictions as the rest of us. Above the law. Now I think it's important that everyone understand these very simple points. The idea that some of us are able to transcend the law in order to hold others accountable to it is fucking bullshit. The idea that we are supposed to surrender our rights to another human at the behest of their mood is absolute fucking bullshit. And finally, the idea that police are somehow better citizens, or not breaking the law regularly, or that they should be protected when violating said laws they're once again employed to protect, is complete and total bullshit. Now, I will say from the start of this point that I recognize this is a dangerous job, dealing with sometimes dangerous people, and that in certain, dire situations, lethal force is going to be necessary. But here's probably the most glaring issue. We all agree murder is bad, right? So then why do those paid to protect us seem to do it so goddamn often? Isn't that like something we all agree is pretty much the worst thing? Why are they allowed to do it if they don't feel like someone is listening to them well enough? Shouldn't there be like a long list of options before lethal force? And when they fear for their safety, aren't they supposed to be above the fear? Aren't they trained? You gave them guns. Aren't they supposed to be the ones running in to stop whatever issue, not create more? Isn't it about time that we created some goddamn rules that they're expected to follow too, and held them accountable? Like, killing someone because they're squirming around while you're trying to take their freedom, a moment when they're understandably distraught isn't okay. I woke up a few weeks ago to another video of unnecessary police violence. They didn't kill anybody this time. It was just another recorded power trip by the boys in blue on an unsuspecting motorist. An NYPD truck basically ran a guy on a scooter off the road using maneuvers that at the very best would be considered dangerous driving, but at worst could be considered an unlawful attempted assault. Fortunately, the scooter DR managed to make an exit before the cop was successful in causing the crash. But remind me, who pulls them over when they may be driving under the influence? Or at the very least recklessly endangering the lives of other motorists? The answer is they may get a slap on the wrist, but their licenses aren't at risk. Their insurance rates won't go up. They don't have to feel the ripple effect the consequences of their actions would typically push out. Why? If we are to respect those upholding the law, I don't think it's wrong to expect them to follow the same ones. They should be setting the example, not breaking them to prove their points. Tools of oppression. Another core issue here is the way policing has developed to increase the pressure of oppression onto certain communities. That is to say, there are certain communities the police love to make an example out of, where small infractions are turned into bigger problems simply because of who the offender is. Minorities are the most visibly affected by this, and over-policing has not only not solved the big issues affecting their communities, in many situations they've made them worse, while simultaneously promoting a deep mistrust of authority in those targeted. I'm not arguing here that we should blindly trust authority, but can't you imagine how much more anxiety a person of color must feel when being pulled over compared to a white person? I'm speaking from a place of privilege when I say there's a lot less of a chance that the encounter ends with being shot for me than it does for those with darker skin, and it's still the worst thing I could imagine. That in and of itself should be a major issue we all want solved. but that's not the target I can effectively speak to. While those actions are horrific in themselves, let's take something a bit more innocuous, and specific to this publication: cannabis. How many lives have been ruined over the war on drugs? How many families were destroyed or ripped apart because of a plant that grows freely from the earth? Something that we know isn't as dangerous as, say, alcohol or cigarettes, something that's been used for hundreds of years, and something that the forefathers of this country cultivated. And it's not just cultivating this plant that's been cause enough for them to wreck someone's existence as they know it. We all know people have been thrown in jail for quantities that cost less than $100. And what was the result? Nothing beneficial to society. Lots of people locked up, and the industry is larger than ever. How do you tell someone you've got locked up that the crime they committed is now legal? And even worse, how do you not immediately let them out when that happens? And finally, for a group of people who are supposed to protect and help us, why don't they ever show up when you need them? It would be far harder to make this argument if we all could readily think of a handful of examples of them truly protecting and serving, right? Why does it seem like society is devolving and they have bigger budgets than ever? They're sucking up every resource that should be used to protect and empower communities, and are destroying them. And they get more money every year, and you have no other option. We have no mental health services. Fuck, the cost of health care at all is through the roof, and people are hurting, and yet it's like they only show up to increase the stress. People will break into your house, and if the coach shows up, the criminal will be back on the street by breakfast. But a gang shows up with guns to rob licensed facilities and they don't even pull up at all. People get into car accidents now and you tell them to handle it themselves, but 14 squad cars will rush over to the street takeover for the chance to beat up some kids. For all of these reasons, I can't help but despise what your uniform represents. It's not a symbol of hope today, it's the costume of the opposition. Final thoughts. Although I do believe people can change, and that we should forgive those who do wrong, especially after they've served time attempting to right the wrongs of their past, it's seemingly impossible not to despise the agents of this chaos that's causing a lot more visible harm to our homes and neighbors than it is good. Maybe back in the day things made sense. In small rural areas, where everybody knew everybody. As I've said before, I'm sure there are officers all over the place who really do want to help people and serve their community, but that's not how it looks from the big picture today. It looks like those people are outnumbered by overzealous egomaniacs who just want to tell everyone else what to do, or what they can't, and who may kill you if you don't act exactly the way they're commanding, often in overlapping and contradictory requests. In fact, it looks and feels to most of these over-policed communities that you're making matters worse, and these are communities that need you, and the resources you're supposed to provide. That's Buster shit. So let me be very clear here. I hate anyone who thinks they should be able to make or enforce rules for the rest of us, but feels above them themselves. I hate copes. I hate snitches. I hate tattletales and all the like. Anyone who for any reason thinks their freedom or rights are any more important than anyone else's. Anyone who thinks we should surrender ours to them, and every wily bitch tellin'. I hate the judges and the politicians too while we're at it, but frankly they're not the ones with the tendency to maim and murder. At least not in the same way. And if you got through this, yes, I'll admit again I do know they're not all bad. I have some friends with family serving who are going to be very upset with me once they see this, but if firefighters had a tendency to start fires on a regular basis, don't you think we'd have problems with that too? Or if paramedics caused new injuries, doctors with a high death rate lose their jobs. For fuck's sake, in most high-pressure jobs, if you fuck up royally, like killing or severely injuring another human being, but often much smaller less serious things than that, you're at the very least getting fired. Why is it different for those who are supposed to be the example? If you want us to feel differently, you have to show that you're different. You need to enact real change, whether it be in your own community, or in your city, county, or state at large. Your mad kids are screaming ACAB, but you guys are the ones acting like it. You have harassed us, demeaned us, but not often protected us like the sides of your cars say. It's why all that needs to show people you've changed, and are here to help, and not hurt them. Until then, it's always going to be a bird from me. ACAB Cannabis Community Copes Culture Discrimination Featured Law Enforcement NYPD Oppression Police Brutality Social Media Weirdos Total 0 Shares Share Tweet Author Jon Capote. Jon Capote is a strategist, producer, and creative writer. He has both planned the things you hear about on TV, and been the one to write about them. He has helped produce Pulitzer Prize-winning work for the largest names in media, won awards himself for his topical takes on cannabis subcultures, and judged just about every cannabis competition that's worth its weight in America. He is both creator and consumer, or connoisseur, as he prefers, but he has a terrible green thumb, so don't go thinking he can keep a plant alive. While he has had a storied career spanning from production for major artists and festivals to developing nationally deployed marketing initiatives for major brands, he smokes a lot of weed and has forgotten most of the cool stuff he's done. Currently the VP of Content for High Times, he publishes a monthly collection of his favorite new products, dubbed the Stone Cold Cop List, as well as feature profiles on his favorite brands. 11 comments. Jeff Williams says, July 7, 2023 at 9:13 p.m. Damn Jon, I didn't know you were such a good writer. I had no doubts about your taste and coolness. But that was a heartfelt article that many of us can relate to. Like Dalton said, just be nice. Until it is time to not be nice. Reply. Jon Capote says. July 9, 2023 at 3:50 p.m. Thanks for reading, Jeff. I appreciate the kind words. Reply. MZ says. July 8, 2023 at 7:42 a.m. Yeah. I'm in agreement over copes, but your anti-snitch stance doesn't hold much weight. While I agree with you about cannabis, who decides which societal norms are fit to be ignored or not? You? I proudly snitched my way through college, tackling on all the cheats who thought that their crib sheets entitled them to a better grade than someone who had worked hard for it. I take it you also hate government whistleblowers who snitch on their bosses and expose their corruption. All copes should be aware of the systemic biases in their workplace, but your snitch argument is at best a very slippery slope. Reply. Jon Capote says. July 9, 2023 at 3:49 p.m. My dude, you being pissed people were better at cheating than you were at learning in college does not equate to whistleblowing. In fact, whistleblowing is an often necessary action, something I typically support, where tackling like you did is rooted solely in selfishness. I don't celebrate that at all, but I'm glad you're at least proud of what I'd call you. Other people succeeding however they may attempt to game the system doesn't take away from your success, and feeling that way probably fosters a constant hurt inside. Read my piece on shit talking. There's a more formal stance on when speaking out makes sense, but snitching without actually protecting anyone's actual well-being is big shit. Reply. MZ says. July 10, 2023 at 8:52 a.m. Sounds like a typical response from a guy who is proud of pushing craft like Red Bull. 30 years on the rock, having spent over a decade building events, with over 500 produced before leaving New York City in 2014. Are you really counting your teen and preteen efforts? Some might argue that after copes, lawyers, and politicians there might be a space on that list for marketing tools. Sorry, son. You ain't selling me bupkies. Reply. Jon Capote says. July 10, 2023 at 1:53 p.m. The top-selling energy drink globally since its inception. A brand you immediately recognize. LMAO, yeah, they know nothing about marketing. Also shows hardinage efforts. You know what a festival is, right? The fact that you think after self-proclaiming yourself as a snitch your opinion holds anyway is cute, but where do you see me soliciting you? LMAO, this is an argument piece, and you've offered no rebuttals except I like to snitch. Great, thanks for reading. Reply. MZ says. July 10, 2023 at 9:58 p.m. Yeah. If a colleague took credit for your ideas or work product you'd never snitch. Sure. Your arguments are juvenile and pretty much worthless. I could explain this to you until you're blue in the face, but understanding it for you is beyond me. I would never put my teen efforts on a bio, but then again, I don't need to pad it. And I thought the idiots who can't shut up about their high school football years were pathetic. you win. As for reading, pretty sure I'm going to give it a break. Donnie Danco's new efforts are much more to my taste. Enjoy your role in destroying the community through shilling for corporate cannabis. IMZ says. July 10, 2023 at 10:12 p.m. And where do you see me soliciting you? Apparently you're not aware of who signs your paychecks and what exactly it is that they do. Ever seen an objective viewpoint? https://www.politico.com/states/story/2020/09/0 for /The Long Fall of High Times 1,315,507. Reply. John Capita says. July 11, 2023 at 8 o'clock p.m. I wouldn't, because when you're really making things you don't mind when someone tries to get credit. You just distance yourself. Murder is worthless to you. Again, no actual rebuttal, just a trust me you're wrong take. Forgive me for having very little faith in that argument. And you keep getting to the Steam thing, because that's when I started throwing shows. Is that what you're referencing? That's a reach, but personally given the scale of what my partner and I did before we turned 20, yeah, I'd actually love to see what you were doing back then. But shilling corporate cannabis on a post about hating copes. Jesus, you're dense, but I appreciate you trying. It's funny you read the piece mostly written by a former employee and call it an objective viewpoint though. Typically journalistic integrity means not working on stories you're emotionally invested in unless they're an OPED like this, but hey, you think you've got it all figured out. Shouts to Danny * though. I love his work and always wish him the best. Reply. IMZ says. July 13, 2023 at 2:44 p.m. Flat out just don't believe you. You're just lying through your teeth. Distance yourself. Sure. In my teen years I spent my extracurricular time split between working with homeless children and working with a friend in animal conservation, both in the developing nation. I would trade on neither to promote my career. But you enjoy and take pride in pushing useless energy drinks. The literature is out there, assuming you can understand it, which would probably be a mistake. Reply. John Capita says. July 19, 2023 at 8:35 a.m. That sounds dope. I'm glad you feel bragging about charity gives you more credibility. Decent people do good things because it's the right thing to do, not to brag about it. But you're still deflecting. I would imagine those would be good learning lessons, but you seem to have your head just as far up your ass as I assumed it was before. It clearly hasn't made you a better person, but sure. Keep being proud of snitching and making excuses for why you're not further along in life. I'm sure it was the kid who cheated on your college test's fault. LOL. Reply. Leave a reply, cancel reply. Your email address will not be published. Required fields are marked *. Comment *. Name *. Email *. Website. Save my name, email, and website in this browser for the next time I comment. Viewed comments 11. Follow us. Facebook 5.8M. Twitter 720k. Instagram 2.5M. YouTube 270k. Related posts. Read more. You know what I learned after a tea break? That I really love smoking weed. Reevaluating habits and overcoming self-stigmatization. Read more. WTF, Florida. This year, Florida's Amendment 3 could legalize the recreational market in the state's existing billion-dollar medical one. Read the many layers of this movement. Read more. My sobriety hall pass list, Hunter Biden for president. You could do a little crack with Hunter Biden, as a treat. Read more. Self-Care Sundays. Comedian Mike Glazer walks you through how he takes care of his mental well-being in this week's Weirdos. Read more. Not Trapped, the hashtag. The infamous multi-hyphenate shares his thoughts on being young and black in and around the cannabis industry. Read more. The Weirdos State of the Union. To celebrate the second birthday of Weirdos, our VP of Content waxes on the year we've had, and where we're going from here. Read more. Brand AIDS. Some reflections on creating the weed brand in an oversaturated market hanging on by a thread. Read more. Friends don't let friends jump through loopholes. It's time to take a stand against gas station weed. advertise legal directory or company terms of use privacy policy California Residents Privacy Notice Right for Us Investor Relations. Since 1974, High Times Magazine has been the #1 resource for cannabis news, culture, brands and marijuana legalization laws. Total 0. Share